Hello again, everyone, and welcome to part two of our discussion on communication and reality, where we are going to be going deeper with communication and meaning. As usual, I will now make my face visible down here in the corner so that you can see me. Hello. And I just kind of want to dive in. I want to keep us going here. We spent the first part of class this week offering our definitions of communication that we found in our fishing trips. And then after I had you go through that, where we talked about doing those definitions. We asked some questions of intent. We talked about the quotation, one cannot not communicate. And we asked the question, are we always communicating? Do we have to have intent to be communicating? And then you went over to your first journal, and you may have completed that already. You might still be working on it. I'm not sure where you're at in that. And that's okay if you're not done and watching this. That's okay. You have until Sunday to turn that journal in. Now we have to turn our attention to meaning. So many of the questions that we were talking about with intent were then on the other side related to meaning, and so we have to ask these specific questions. So we've asked some questions of intent. We're pondering that. We're reflecting on that, and now it's time to ask questions of meaning. So just like I did with communication and all, are we always communicating or not? I have a quotation for you. This one's not worded nearly as weirdly as the other one, so take a look at this right here. The quotation for us to kind of get us on this track is, words don't mean, people mean. I know it sort of sounds like that old quotation that guns don't kill people, people kill people. And it's kind of in the same vein of meaning, I think. We could have a really good discussion over what this quotation means in and of itself, but kind of to move us on as quickly as possible, I want to kind of tell you what it means. Words don't mean, people mean. What it's really getting at is the location of meaning in our words. Do the words carry the meaning inherent in and of themselves? Do words have meaning in their core? Or is meaning something that us as humans create and sort of attach to the word, and use the word then to attach to something else to help us sort of make sense of our world? What this is saying is that we create the meaning as human beings. We create the sounds coming out of our mouths. I mean, that's what language is. Really, all language is a set of sounds that we learn to put in order, and we learn to shape the sound waves coming up out of our esophagus with the fat on our face and the muscle in our mouth, and we shape the sound waves to travel in a certain shape that your ears culturally get attuned to hearing and recognizing, so that when I say everything I'm saying right now, you're actually able to understand what I'm saying. It's kind of amazing. And so the meaning is not in the words themselves. It's in us. And what this leads us into is this next point, that words don't mean, people mean, and it leads us to this idea that we're actually born into what's called a representational system. We could go weeks on this. I just want to introduce this idea right now because this is what happens on the level of meaning making in our minds and in our communication. We have to have a representational system to access in order for us to be able to understand what another person is doing verbally, non-verbally, with their body, stuff like that. So what the representational system does is it just helps you make meaning of the world. So to kind of show you how this works, we are going to do a little bit of a thought exercise. Okay, it's in a couple parts. So part one is very, very simple. All right, I'm going to ask you to do something that you probably don't even have to get up and move to do. Okay, so here we go. I want you to take a look at the nearest table. That's it. Just take a look at the nearest table. Can you see it? Strangely, I don't actually have a table in my office. That's I just realized that because I had the thought in my head that most places have a table, not me in my office. So, but I want you to take a look at the nearest table. Were you able to see one? Or if you weren't able to see one, you know that there's not one there. So here's my question for you now. How did you know what to look at? I mean, yes, I told you to look at a table, but when I said take a look at a table, you looked for something very specific, didn't you? You looked for something that that actually looks a little bit like this, didn't you? Something with a flat surface and four legs, probably. It might be shaped differently, it might look differently, it might be a different color, but you knew to look for something that is shaped in this way. Yeah? And so here's my question. How did you know to look for this thing? How did you know that when I said look for a table, that you should look for something with a flat surface and four legs? Well, you know that because of your representational system. You grew up in a culture, you grew up in a world that gave you a representational system. You've learned the words for the things out in the world. And so you, at some point in your life, learned the word and its link to the thing, the table, whatever that is. Okay? It could have happened when you were younger. It could have happened when you were a little bit older. Usually, even young children know the table, right? And so, you and I live in a representational system that gives us representations for the stuff of the world. So, for example, I'm sitting here at my desk, and I can say, "Hey, this is a pencil." And we would probably all agree that this is a pencil. It's a pencil. See? Any disagreement? Not that you can tell me, but there won't be any disagreement that this is a pencil. It's a pencil, right? And so if I actually said to you, "Hey, can I borrow a Sharpie?" and then you handed me this, I would say that's not the same thing, right? This is a pencil, and I needed a Sharpie. Sharpies are different than pencils. Sharpies are different. And in fact, it would even be strange for me to call a Sharpie a pen, because our representational system is so complex that the difference between a pencil and a Sharpie is pretty drastic. Even though they're both writing implements, even though they're both things that I can use to mark on stuff with, they are not the same thing, and I know this because of my representational system. Okay, so that's how I know that this thing right here is a table. I have a word for a thing. So now that's part one of the thought exercise over. Now let's do the second part of the thought process. Okay. So first part of the thought game here is this. I think we've all agreed that this here is a table. Yes. So then, good. That's a table. What if Brandon, growing up in his house, had some parents who had an interesting sense of humor? By the way, my parents would never do what I'm about to talk about. They are lovely people, all right? But let's just play along with this. Let's just say I grew up in a house where my parents decide to teach me the representational system correctly. So I learned pencil, I learned Sharpie, I learned pen, I learned hair, I learned nose, I learned mouth, all that kind of stuff, right? But the one relationship that my parents decide to play with is the relationship between what we have here, which is a table, and a chicken. Let's just say that in my house growing up, my parents, because they have an interesting sense of humor, decide to only mess with this one representational relationship, and they switch it. And so for little Brandon growing up in his house, let's just say that this thing with the flat surface and the four legs is actually called a chicken. It doesn't change the form. It doesn't change the function. So we sit at the chicken to have dinner. Whenever I'm a little boy, I like to put a blanket over the chicken and make a chicken fort and play with my cars and little men underneath that. Right? Whenever I get in trouble or something, I have to sit at the chicken and have a talk with my parents, okay? And then vice versa, this is just called the table. And so as a little boy, I loved going to get my table nuggets. I would call my friends, oh, you're nothing but a yellow-bellied table. I can't even say it. I'm so used to it. You're nothing but a yellow-bellied table whenever they wouldn't, do the dare that we were daring or whatever we did whenever we were little boys, right? So everything let's just imagine everything in my representational system is fine. It links up like it's supposed to, except this one relationship. I grow up in my house calling this a chicken and this a table. Okay? So then let's take this to the next level. First day of school. Brandon, me super cute in my my Velcro sneakers and my Ninja Turtle backpack or whatever my backpack. The Ninja Turtles didn't exist when I went to kindergarten, so I'm old enough that I'm pre that. I head into my first day of class, and the teacher looks at me and says, "Hello, Brandon. Take a seat at one of the tables." What's going to happen? Little Brandon is going to have a very hard time understanding what that teacher means. I'm going to look around that room and I'm not going to see any tables. The teacher told me, hey, have a seat at one of the tables. I'm not going to see any table in that classroom because I've grown up calling table this. And so I'm going to wander around and that teacher's going to say, hey, Brandon, I thought I told you to have a seat at one of the tables. And I'm going to go, yes, you did, but I just don't see any tables in here. And that teacher's going to look around the room, and the room is full of tables to the teacher. And that teacher's going to go, honey, the room's full of tables. And I'm going to go, no, it's not, because as children, we have to have the representational system to help us make sense of the world. And so I'm going to be indignant that I don't see any table, because I know what a table is. Even at age 4, age 5, I'm going to know what that is. And so it's going to take a while, but eventually that teacher and I are going to come to an understanding that I've had the meaning switched. And that teacher and I are going to have to work pretty hard to fix this back to how it's supposed to go. It's supposed to be, this is a table, this is a chicken. And I'm going to have to rework my whole understanding of, oh wait, so it's not table nuggets, it's chicken nuggets. Okay, it's not a chicken fort, it's a table fort. And I'm really going to have to rework my meaning making structures, even around just one simple relationship here, okay? And so I go through this whole weird thought exercise to show us how important the link between the word and the thing actually becomes in our meaning making process. And for you and I, and this is the amazing thing, for you and I to communicate, we have to have representational systems that line up in some way. And so this is why people who speak multiple language can sometimes well, first of all, they have better access to both sides of their brains because they're always having to translate, because the representational systems don't always line up. Sometimes there's something you have in your other language that you're trying to make sense of in this other language, and they just flat don't meet. And so you have to find a way to make it work somehow, right? I'm not saying one's below or one's above. I'm just trying to show that I'm doing the Vogue or whatever that is or something. Sorry. I can't edit that out and I'm too far in, so that's going to stay. And I immediately regret it. Anyway, we'll go back on to what we're doing here. So you have you have these meaning making structures in your world, and you rely on them, and I rely on them, and I rely on you and I to be able to come to terms with, okay, when I say table, you know what I mean. When I say chicken, you know what I mean, right? And so the folks who speak multiple languages get really good at translating and working these things out in their brains. So what this leads us to is it leads us to the importance of the representational system in our understanding of the world in which we live in. Okay? And so what I want to do right now is kind of pause right here, and then I want to do another screencast to kind of cover the final definition of communication, so I have plenty of time to cover it. So just as soon as this is over, just move down to the next thing and click that next screencast, and we'll continue our discussion.